welcome to this channel's very first book review. And this book is actually really interesting because I didn't actually read it. Normally, my favorite way to consume a book is by having a physical copy and reading it. I didn't really have the luxury with this book. Today, I will be reviewing the newly released Dragonsteel Prime. It's so new that the printed versions haven't been shipped. Now, Dragonsteel Prime is one of Brandon Sanderson's curiosities, which is one of the books that he's decided to publish from his earlier years as a writer. He's published these themselves because they weren't exactly up for snuff for getting published. I believe this one, Dragonsteel Prime, actually was rejected by several editors. I'll talk about it later as we go on, but with this book, you can see one of the beginning stepping stones of the fledgling author Brandon Sanderson, and it's interesting to take a look at about this and the author he is today. So, this, unlike the other Prime novel, Way of Kings Prime, the proper book of Dragonsteel isn't out yet, and it's unfortunately won't be for some time. But Brandon Sanderson released this book in his latest Kickstarter for the Words of Radiance leatherbound, and alongside the fifth secret project, which I'm really excited to see. Because they don't have the printed books, the two options for me to try to read it was the ebook or the audiobook. And because I'm not a big fan of reading on the computer screen, I went with the audiobook, which is narrated by, it seems like Sanderson's standard of Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. I think I think that's the names. I'm not that big of an audiobook person. I like reading because I can read a lot quicker than listening, and this was just a proof. The audiobook was 27 hours long. The book itself is over 600 pages. This story, being one of Sanderson's earlier novels, which he scrapped, you can actually see some of the reusable parts. The Shattered Plains, actually, that is in the Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive, actually had its origins here. There's a prototype. It isn't exactly the same, but there's bridges and there is great chasms. Now here's probably the biggest critique I have about this book. The story itself is really good, but my biggest gripe is the quality of the prose. And someone else might not find these problems. I can sometimes be a bit hyper picky because I'm trying to engage my author brain and figure out, this author wrote it this way. I wouldn't do it this way. I'm working on that so I'm not so hypercritical. But I think there were that the prose was clunky at some times. And I know Brandon Sanderson isn't well known for his prose, but it wasn't that. The issues I have are just a couple things when you're listening, you're like, huh? Or Brandon Sanderson used, I think the big one is there's a lot of ly adverbs after dialogue tags. It's not something anybody but really picky authors might find, but I thought it was interesting to know. But onto the story. The story actually was really good. I enjoyed it a lot. The world building is fascinating because it's set in a world that it's before your traditional like fantasy, your knights and kingdoms. It's more of like in ancient times, and just during the times where people are transitioning from the Bronze Age to the Iron and Steel Age, and there's a lot of interesting points, like the characters cannot ride on the horses because the horses are undeveloped, and the characters ride chariots instead. For the first half of the book, almost everyone has bronze weapons, because bronze is the metal that is primarily used. There's dragon steel, but I'll get to that later. And then halfway through, you can start seeing mentions of iron and steel. The historian part of my brain gets a bit mad because it hops straight from bronze plate armor to steel plate armor, and that's not actually how it worked in real life. But I managed to beat my inner historian into submission, and I thought it was still cool. There's also some other interesting points, like there's these caste marks that everybody wears that tells whether they're like a farmer or nobles, and that's actually one of the main contention points of the story. The story, and it's an epic fantasy, so there's multiple viewpoints, but the majority of the story follows this boy, Jarek, who's the son of a lumberman, and after his father sacrifices himself to protect the king decides to take Jarek to the palace, and the king has a bet with another nobleman to see whether peasants can learn like the nobles, where there's a contention where the upper classes, like the nobles and the priests, don't think the peasants are smart. It's an interesting world, which I kind of hope is reused for the future Dragonsteel. And while editing, I realized I forgot to mention the Dragonsteel. Dragonsteel is the mystical metal which they find on the Shattered Plains. It bubbles up and they capture it in vials, and it's like the ultimate metal adamantine, and it's really rare. It's the one of the two big magical elements, the other being microkinesis, which is what the main character and the prototype Hoid use. In this book, we also get to see the precursor to Hoid, Cephandrius, or Topaz, as he's mostly called in the book, has some similarities to Hoid in the books. He can't actually physically harm people, and they both have the delightful wit, which just had me laughing multiple times through the story. I wouldn't recommend this story for everyone, because like I said, it's pretty long and sometimes the prose can get a bit clunky. Brandon Sanderson himself says that most of the main essence of the Cosmeres created and was written about in this book, so the really hardcore Cosmere fans might want to pick it up. And it's not unenjoyable, just the one thing to be warned, this book was originally planned to be a series, and it doesn't have the ending doesn't have a nice tie with a bow. I came in expecting it, so I wasn't disappointed, but just be warned. The second group who I'd recommend this to is actually writers, especially writers who are working on learning their craft. It was very encouraging to see a best-selling author at a point in his career where he actually wasn't that great. And you can see the potential, but you can also see how he's grown, and that was very encouraging and fascinating. And so if you're a fledgling author and who enjoys Sanderson but isn't that big into all the Cosmere intricacies, you might want to pick it up just for a bit of encouraging. Like, hey, everybody had to start somewhere, and if you keep going, who knows, you might be the next big Brandon Sanderson. Now I want to transition into the spoiler section, because there's one other thing I'd like to talk about. I think most people can stay, because like I said, I wouldn't recommend everybody read this unless you're really into the Cosmere or want to take a peek behind Brandon Sanderson's growth as an author. But even then, I don't think it'd hurt you to get this spoiled. But if you really care about it, I'll wait a couple seconds and you can click over. Okay, they're gone. On to spoilers. The ending I found kind of overwhelming. I've heard people talk about the term Sanderlanche, but I never actually understood it, even though I've read all of his stuff. But now I think I do. There was at the ending, there's the prince getting rescued. The villains, the evil Shodel, which are basically the fantasy tie-in for orcs. They're not really that important to this story, I didn't think. They invaded, and this other duke took the throne, and Jarek had a giant revelation, and just there are 27 different things happening all at once, and it was kind of confusing. So, if you want to actually know what a Sanderlanche is, I guess you could read it. It's quite a hike just to get a proper Sanderlanche, but I enjoyed the story along the way. Yeah, I'd actually be interested to know if anyone else has read it. Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. Bye.